Hi, welcome back to Barely Keto. I'm Carl. This week we're making chicken enchiladas with the low-carb refried beans that I learned to make at home. Let's get started. A simple recipe to make, and these make it possible. They're Eden brand black soybeans, and they're just the only reason why you can even have burritos or enchiladas anymore. And then there's some Hatch sugar-free taco sauce, and I'll put those two together in the food processor to make my refried beans, and you can see the difference in the carbs. These for the burrito, a regular burrito has 35 net carbs, 35 per shell. These only have 5. So between those beans and the burritos, you're good to go. So that was a can of crushed tomatoes. You can use whole tomatoes, peeled tomatoes, whatever. And then we got a roasted chicken. And then I'm just going to do some prep work. So on the stove, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to saute those onions. That's one yellow onion. I'm going to saute that in a couple tablespoons of oil with some spices. It'll be in the recipe. And then while that's cooking, you cook that down so that the tomato sauce can thicken. So you're going to cook that down for about a half an hour, and that's the longest part of this whole recipe. So when I put all this together, it's about 45 minutes of prep time and an equal amount of cook time. Now these beans, these soybeans, they're also very high in protein, but they look disgusting. It's like black beans packed in tomato aspect. So you're going to want to rinse those really well. Don't use something that's got fine holes because you'll never get the gel out. So then once those are rinsed, I try to let them dry as much as possible. And then I'm just going to put them in the food processor with a half a cup of the unsweetened salsa. Now you can add other things to this if you want, like, I don't know, a can of chili peppers, whatever you want to play with. So you're just going to throw all that in there and then turn it on, puree. And typically what I'll do is for the length of time it takes me to grate the cheese, I just leave them in there. So you leave them in for about 3 to 5 minutes and they get the perfect consistency. Now the roasted chicken, I'm just going to shred that with a couple of forks. And I'll show you what this looks like. It's almost like a mousse, which also makes it easier to divide. So let me just get this cleaned up. Put the lid on so it doesn't dry out. And the thing, I still haven't nailed the camera angles on this. I'm basically cooking around a tripod. You can see the feet there by the white pan. You're going to throw this in a 13x9 pan. I can usually get 4 or 5 out of this. So I'm just getting myself set up with my chef's tongs because you're going to be dipping the shell in the red sauce when it comes off the stove. So unless you have asbestos fingers, you might want to use the chef's tongs to make sure you don't burn yourself. And that helps soften them up and make them really pliable. And it also helps them brown up when they're in the oven. And one tip that I learned is to just sort of set myself up in the order in which I'm going to put things together, just so it's easier. You do not have to prep the pan with anything. You can just put them right in. If you want to, sure, put some butter with some butter or ghee or spray it down with some avocado oil. What I've learned is this is really messy to put this together. So if you think you're going to be able to do 5, take out all 5 shells and separate them ahead of time so that you're not dealing with it with all the tomato sauce on your fingers. And they also tend to stick together for whatever reason. It must be just how they're made. They have a lot of clutch to each other. So it just helps to pre-separate those. And then I'm going to bring the sauce over from the stove. And then I'm going to start assembling. So you just take your first shell and you're going to submerge it in the red sauce. And I just do it one side at a time. If you put it in all the way and try to cover both sides, when you go to pull it out, you'll find that they tear kind of easily. And that's true of the low carb and true of the originals. So just try to do one side at a time. And then the sauce, you'll find, cools off pretty quickly and you just get in there with your hands. So once you got that done, you're just going to pull it out with the tongs and set it in the pan. And then you're going to start putting your ingredients in there. Now I've also made these with sauteed kale, sauteed Swiss chard. So if you want to add extra vegetables, you can. It's just I didn't have any of that on hand today. So I'm going to put just a couple tablespoons or spoonfuls of the refried soybean mix. And then the next thing I like to do is the layer of cheese, because when you put these all together and fold them, you kind of flip them over. So if you get the cheese on top of the end product, when it melts in the oven, it sinks into the chicken breast, which makes it nice and gooey. I like chewy and gooey. So there you go. And then just fold it from the sides, and then flip one end, and then give it a flip, and push it up against the edge, and then you'll be able to do your next one. So I got 4 done, and I'm just finishing off the 5th now. I've been making this, wow. I remember this came from a Betty Crocker cookbook, so I apologize to anyone who actually makes traditional enchiladas. This recipe probably isn't for you. My goal is to give people, I'm shooting for 31 recipes, so that if you choose to get into this lifestyle, you've got a whole month where you can have food that's going to satisfy you. But Betty Crocker, I don't know that she's the expert. We're putting in the last bit of the pureed soybean. I usually have a little left over, to be honest. And then some more cheese, and you're going to have some cheese left over at the end because you want to be able to throw it on top. And then the last bit of the chicken. I didn't want to overdo it with the chicken, so I had a little left over. And when you buy that roasted chicken, just make sure it doesn't have any sweeteners in it. It's amazing how many have sugar or honey powder. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to that. And then you're just going to spread the remainder of the red sauce on top. And then you just want to cover as much as you can your enchiladas. So just spread that out with a spatula. I could have put the chicken that was left over on top as well, but I didn't. Round that off with the cheese. And then you're going to bake this in a 350 degree oven, as I said, for about 45 minutes. It all depends on your oven, but 40, 45 minutes. Give it a check at maybe 35. And it also depends on how dark you like your cheese. I like my cheese to be just a little bit brown. And that's it. There you go. We're going to throw those in the oven. And they can sit for a while. You can put them in the fridge for a bit if you want, but they're good to go.